Okay, so we're here with one of my favorite poets today, Hollie McNish. Hi, Hollie.
Hiya.
And she's been kind enough not only to do performances with Zine and studioSHY in the past, live, but also just to be here with us to answer a few questions. I'm half dead because it's 5 in the morning, but
I
Holly
can't
seems
complain
to
then. I
be.
thought I was up early, but that's
Yeah,
fine.
it's actually early over there too. 10 a.m. is still pretty early to, but hopefully we'll get some awesome answers out of you, Holly.
Yeah.
So if I go straight into the questions, I wanted to know first of all, because I'm so intrigued by this, by the fact that there are still poets that are making it big, such as yourself and Kate Tempest. I don't know if you've come across her before.
Yeah, I know her. She's lovely.
Awesome. I'm just really fascinated by the fact that you guys occupy this niche, and it's actually women as well. We'll come on to that later. So I'd like to ask you, because you do tend to kind of, in your tone sometimes when you perform, you blur the boundaries a little bit between rap and, I mean, Kate does it more than you, but sometimes
Yeah.
between rap and poetry. So how would you define yourself as a poet, an artist, a rap artist?
As a person first, and then yeah, I think a poet. Like I didn't. It took me about 2 years, I think, to actually say I was a poet because it sounds a bit cheesy to me, which is
Yeah.
silly. But I was doing quite a practical job before then and sort of studied economics, so the idea of being a poet sounded a bit, I don't know, you know. But yeah, I would definitely not say a rapper. Like I think rap is an amazing skill, and Kate's brilliant at it. She's got a band as well, doesn't she? The Sound of
Mm.
Rum, and yeah, and her latest album is with music. So I think it's totally different. I just can't. I can't rap. I think it's such a skill. When it's some rap I
Yeah.
don't like, but a lot of it I think is totally amazing.
Yeah.
And to keep on the beat like that, and even if you take away the music, it's still, you can still hear the beat in the way they say
Yeah.
it. Whereas I think with my poetry I need to have breaks and pauses, and it's not in bars, or it's not even written in verses.
Mm.
So yeah, I think it's quite different. But yes, Kate is very good. Kate's very good at
And
that.
but you've had events, I think, that you organized before where it's a face off between poets and rap artists. So you recognize the similarity between what you do
Yeah,
and
definitely. I think it's quite unfair though that that night they do it in Brighton. A woman called Rosie Carrick, I think she started it, or she runs one in Brighton, which is really popular. And we wanted to do one in Cambridge,
Mhm.
but it's a little bit unfair because the poets always win. Basically, they
Really?
always win because you've got to do it without the music. So the
Oh, I
rappers
see.
get up there and then they take away like half of their art form, basically. But it is, I love hearing rap without the music and
Mhm.
slow down a little bit, because some of their words are amazing and it sometimes gets lost in the speed, or on the microphone, or if you're in a club you don't hear what they're saying so much. So
Mm.
yeah, I love it.
So
I think probably rappers are poets, but I don't think all poets are rappers, if that makes sense.
interesting.
I think
And what
all
would you?
rappers are poets, but not all poets are rappers. Yeah.
So you'd say it's definitely to do with the musical beat and timing and this pace and all of that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And would you say your place as a poet like what is the place of a poet, an artist in today's society then, especially given that they were of a lot more importance, say, in the past, and now they're overcome by mainstream more? How
Yeah.
would you position yourself?
Boy, that's hard, isn't it? I guess because there used to be bards, didn't there? Like,
Yeah.
that would go and announce the news in poetry and stuff. I think, not that I know that exactly, but I think there's so many different roles for art in general. I
Definitely.
think like some poetry is so good at getting people to think about certain issues. Some poetry is really good, like George the poet. I think he talks about current affairs quite a lot, or Sabrina Mahfouz talks about lots of issues to do with women and girls, but then there's some poetry that you listen to and it's just beautiful to read or to listen to. So I don't think it has to be have a specific purpose. I just think, like with music, different people make poetry for different reasons, or they write different types of poetry. So I think whatever you want it to be, really. Like some people write poetry just to get things off their chest or just for themselves, which has just as big a role, I think, as the people that go and read it out to other people.
But it's a huge, and it's in, like, some of your poems make sense now, mathematics and everything, now that I consider that you studied economics. It's a huge shift in a totally different sphere. Was there something you found that brought your purpose more, like, out in poetry rather than in the financial sector?
Well, it wasn't. I was doing development studies in economics, so it was totally to do with like human rights and global trade, but global trade in terms of like who it's good for and who it's not good for. So it was less kind of international development and more, forced migration and things like that as well. I did as a specialist topic. So I just have always written poems about stuff that I'm reading or studying. And mathematics I wrote after reading a book called Immigrants, Your Country Needs Them. And after reading some other research papers for uni. It's just a way I've always condensed my ideas. So even at school, like for GCSE physics, I used to write, this is really sad, but I used to write poems based on like the physics equations for velocity and stuff, just to make me remember them. So it's always just a personal way of like trying to sort things out in my head.
Yeah, I did the doodles too. I totally understand and get you when it comes to that. I'm trying to get my questions up here. And with regards to, again, coming back to your inspirations, if I get an idea for who you like model who you look up to, who you see yourself as I want to be like that kind of poet. Is there somebody from the past or in current that you kind of hold as your inspiration?
Not really. That might sound really bad, but not really from the poetry world. I think anyone that's doing something that they love doing and that's quite helpful, I think I look up to. Like I wouldn't look up to a poet any more than I'd look up to, I don't know, a doctor or a parent or a scientist, or there's so many people out there doing stuff that is quite inspiring. I mean, at the moment I'm surrounded by, I do the school run, so I go and there's lots of mums and dads, and lots of them, the stuff they're doing is amazing. Like all the people that are doing childminding, or there's one glaciologist that's studying glaciers and all things that I hadn't even heard of. So it's more it's just generally, I think, you hear about lots of people doing nothing on the news or people doing negative things, but I'm surrounded by people all the time who are doing really inspirational things, I think. Doesn't have to be massive, doesn't have to be in the news, but just, not really poets. I think in terms of poets, it's more people that I just see when I go to gigs. Like there are amazing UK poets at the moment that I think are brilliant, and every time I go to an open mic night or do a gig, I just love hearing other poets.
Would you give us some names?
Because Deanna Roger I think's amazing, Bridget Minamore, Shaman Suleiman, Sabrina Mahfouz, Raymond Antrobus, Selena Godden.
Yeah, your blog has a few mentions of them as well.
Yeah, there's so many of them. And they are like it's getting more popular, but they're not, none of us are like famous or anything like that. But I just it's just been brilliant. It's been brilliant meeting them and knowing them and seeing them perform.
Okay, I would have expected something in terms of your writing style or anything, but nothing you would say. I read something and then that's where it came from or started off. It was literally from your.
I think it started off from just kids. Oh, not just kids poetry, but kids poetry. Like I loved poetry when I was about 7 or 8. My mum used to read me poems, and really sort of silly poems. There's one called When Betty Eats Spaghetti. Like that was my favourite thing to read for about a year. And Roger McGough, Please Mrs. Butler as well. So I used to read or get read to me or whatever bedtime stories, a lot of poetry and rhymes, and Roald Dahl, like Roald Dahl's revolting rhymes I loved. But then when I went to school, I wasn't really that into poetry. I was into working. I worked a lot at school. Like I was very geeky and I wanted to do essays and write, and so but I was never really into poetry at all.
No Lord Byron or Shakespeare.
No, and I get really embarrassed as well because people ask me
that's interesting.
about things at gigs and who's my favourite poet and do I like the classical poets or the romantic. I honestly have no idea. I did English literature, but I did plays and books. I didn't do any poetry, and at uni I did French and German before I did economics, and again I didn't do the poetry modules.
No, it's actually really interesting always to hear an artist's own inspirations, because it's always so varied. You assume one thing but something else comes out. I might have guessed Rodaldo.
Yeah, I love rolled
From the way you
pastels.
described the table and the way that their routine was, the breakfast routine, I think I
Oh,
kind of got a glimpse of that. It was one of my favorite
did
poems
you?
where you, yeah.
That's a
But
compliment.
it's interesting that you really like and enjoy works by and promote works by female poets as well. And would you say that obviously occupy a space where you're talking about mothers and raising a daughter yourself,
Yeah.
what girls have to face? I remember reading an article you wrote about shoes recently.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Would you say that's a space that you occupy intentionally, or is it something that you found yourself in, I don't know, as a result of who you are?
Yeah, I think I just found myself in. I generally just write about things that I'm thinking or things that I'm going through or feeling or reading as well.
Mm.
So, yeah, but obviously I'm female and I grew up as a female and now I've got a daughter, so it's even more
Yeah.
sort of seeing. I didn't really think about stuff like that when I was a teenager. I didn't really think about sexism or feminism or anything like
Yeah.
that. Like if somebody had asked me when I was 18 if I was a feminist, I'd be like, no, no,
I relate to
no
you
way.
there. Mm.
The same as, that kind of stigma attached to the word. That, like, I totally had that. And now that I've met, through meeting quite a lot of the poets and my just different friends or people that I've spoken to, and now seeing my daughter growing up, I just get more angry about things to do with women and girls now, I think. Because I sort of, realising that it starts from such a young age is quite shocking. Even from someone, I remember when my daughter was about 6 weeks old, and someone who had been a childminder and looked after lots of babies said, "Oh, I don't know how to hold her." It's like, what do you mean you don't know how to hold her? And she said, "Well, I've only looked after boys." It's like, oh my gosh, she's 6 weeks old. Like, you don't hold her the same way as you hold a boy. That kind of thing. It's just, I find it shocking, really.
Yeah, I relate to you totally there when it comes to how quickly your eyes are kind of cast into disparaging differences when you come in, especially into university, and it's a world where privilege is a lot more highlighted than other places.
Yeah, totally.
But with regards to then, in your opinion, why is it that most women tend to stick to, say, for example, you studied economics, they find more power in degrees and subjects where they can then go into corporate rather than doing what you've done, which is go into more creative fields, would you say? What?
I don't know, no, not really. To be honest, I don't really know the statistics of what women's jobs are, but like I guess I only know people around me, and most people around me have gone into teaching or like nursing. My mum's a nurse, my aunties are all teachers, my friends are teachers, nurses, doctors.
Would you say it's rarer to be a poet or an artist for a woman especially?
I guess it's harder. I think it's just, to be honest, rather than for a woman, I think it's harder for people with less money to do anything like that. Like harder for anyone that's not from middle class or upper middle class or hasn't got a very rich family to support them or anything like that, because it's a big gamble. Like I only started doing poetry full time after I was sure that I was making enough money that I can pay rent, look after my kids. So I didn't quit my job, but I sort of met quite a lot of people who were struggling, like wandering poets and stuff. And I think that's a privilege that you've got if you don't need to like work every day to put food on the table, to be honest. So I think maybe because of that. But I don't know if there's more women that go into corporate stuff. Like on my courses that was like development and economics, it was totally based around human rights and global development, and most of the people were female on my course.
It's interesting because from what I gleaned while I was at university, it tended to be that women tend to, well, they find it that they can secure positions in corporate more. But again, it's the money and safety issue. And like you were just mentioning, it's funny that it's hard for artists to secure a living for them, but at the same time we're at a time where art is prized a lot more. It's worth a lot more than it's ever been before. So the artists can make a lot of money if they wanted to from their work. Would you say that?
It depends what people do, doesn't it? I guess, but the corporate stuff comes into it anyway, because of a lot of the funding that you get through arts is through government. A lot of that funding is through taxation, which is not necessarily from the richest because they seem to not pay as much tax. But all like Sky Arts funds or lots of festivals are sponsored. So
Arts Council.
It's quite hard, isn't it, to separate like the arts world from the corporate world, because a lot of the funding and stuff
comes from there.
actually deep down kind of comes from
That's true.
that.
But would you say it's important as an artist to produce in order to sustain yourself and financially, or like to produce art for money?
I don't know. No, it's just. I think it depends. There are so many people doing so much different stuff. Like loads of people have other jobs and they're doing art on the side, or especially now that like live events seem to be getting bigger. So even in music, the idea of sales of CDs and stuff, that's less so making money, and doing live events is now quite good, or workshops, or there's lots of different ways that some people do lots and lots of corporate stuff and do adverts, or write something for a company. But then other people I know are working in schools, so they're doing poetry in schools. Like Dean Atta is now sort of a full-time spoken word person in school in London. So yeah, I guess it depends on what you want to do.
That's true. What I actually love about you is how easy it is to reach out to you as a fan and to be able to say to you that would you please like if there's something that where we're hosting an event, you were so accessible. So it's good to know that you have a balance between the fact that you do really like a mainstream. Well, I've seen you on BBC and things like that, but at the same time you maintain you're like the boss of where you make your own appearances and things like that. Is that because you maintain?
No, I'd hate not to be. I think it would be really hard if you didn't. I know some people have agents, and I worked with a manager on my last album and doing a tour, but it's not. Yeah, you've still got a say in what you do. It must be really hard otherwise, to be honest. Like I've had a few run-ins with people when they've asked me to do really stupid stuff, like for one poetry video, they said it would be better. This was like a big TV channel, said it would be better if I did the poem, but if they could film the poem being projected onto my naked skin. I was like,
it sounds like something done in the Netherlands. There've been projects like that before, believe it or not.
Yeah, well, it was so annoying because they'd already filmed about 10 male poets and rappers, and then first female to be filmed. They were like, maybe it would be really arty to have you naked, and I was like, maybe it wouldn't.
They picked the wrong poet.
I've asked that if it was one of them then.
Is that why you wrote the particular articles up on your blog about nudity, and to clarify your position on it?
Oh, that was just, I just get annoyed with whenever you write anything about, like, for example, I guess page 3 would be the biggest example at the moment, but whenever you write anything about that, people just jump on it as in you're like prude, like all the insults that you've got anyway since I was about 12 in the playground. Like if you don't kiss someone, you're prudish. If you do kiss someone, you're a slag. It's like, it's hard to win, isn't it?
Yeah. It's really interesting, the battleground that you're occupying in between that space of challenging page 3 and campaigning for breastfeeding in public. It's a really
because it's not about nudity, is it? It's just about different, like how women and girls are portrayed. That's it. It's not, like, to be honest, I wish the UK was more like other countries in terms of like the film industries and the TV, that they showed nakedness more, but not always to do with sex. Like the only time we see nakedness ever is in a sexual
and even
sexual sense, and
even
people
that
are
sexuality
naked, like, have naked bodies.
Even that sexuality is detached, and there's none
of that. There's none of that, and there's none. I'm not naked just to have sex. In fact, I'm not always naked to have sex. It's like, this is so weird. Like we don't see any sort of, not that you need to, but it's hard to know how to balance the fact that there's all this like totally in your face just to do with sex, and it's mainly not to do with sex. It's mainly like a woman lying back waiting to someone to have sex with her. It's not like she looks like she's going to be very active in it. It's hard to know whether taking away those images is more helpful or showing more natural images would be better. The only way to sort of tackle it, I don't really know.
Well, it's a conscious decision on part of advertising, because it's a thing between vulnerability and total
it's just so loss. It's a bit depressing that all the pictures,
use of women basically.
Yeah, but then it's not even like it's sort of that kind of sexual, but also like very weak. Like, I know this is I don't know if it's a funny comparison, but it's true that lots of the like modelling pictures to sell stuff, they really look quite similar to the like rape crisis
Yeah.
images,
Yes, they
and
do.
all the like
Yeah, I agree with you.
children, abused children,
Yeah.
charity
And the
campaigns. Like,
poses,
really
if you put a
similar
real
poses.
person in those postures, it's like they've actually been like their arms broken or what.
Yeah, but they look like
It's true,
something's
true.
happened,
Yeah.
or there's lots of that sort of heroin
Exactly.
chic, like, oh my god, in the shower, like a,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's
a bit like,
it's really disturbing actually, and it's something that I'm glad to see people like you engage with, because it's something that needs to be challenged more often. But there's really little time, and I've already taken, I think, more than what I already asked you for. So
it's all right. I've done the school run already this morning. I'm all right.
brilliant. Bless you, Holly. It's been a real pleasure talking to you. I wanted to come back to Kate and to ask you how your work compared to hers, if you had any, if you just had a moment to conclude, because she's also another very unique, I think, figure in contemporary British culture. She's not mainstream as such, but I mean,
Yeah.
when she speaks, she's very intelligent and a totally different speaking style to what we're used to women speaking like.
Yeah, it's
That's
totally
why.
different. She's amazing.
Mm.
I actually wrote a poem called "I'm Not Kate Tempest."
I haven't seen that actually.
So I'd like, there's loads of differences between our poems. I'm not sure if we'd be compared that much if we were male, but I do understand why people compare us. I just think hers is so full, and it's so full of vocabulary and ideas and connections to Shakespeare or to tragedies, and you know, it's kind of fuller than mine. I think the way that I think,
the style
and the way that
is similar,
poetry,
I'd say.
Yeah, I've always used poetry to like simplify things.
Yeah.
Whereas her poetry, like, she's into the words and the language. I'm not so much into that.
Yeah.
I just write down a poem to sort of clear up something in my head normally. So I'm much less focused on what word I use in this situation. Do you know what I mean? If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Which people would say makes it not as good, but
no,
I just think there's space for everything, isn't there?
Definitely. I just find your style still, like the fact that you both have this sort of this working class sort of approach almost to an art that's considered quite elitist. I found that quite interesting about both of you.
Well, I went to Cambridge University when I was 18, so I studied my degree there, French and German degree there, and I'm really pleased that I did, but it was quite different coming from a state school and being the only one from your school that went there and seeing the reaction of certain people. Obviously, I've got very good friends from there as well, but I think I got so annoyed with 4 years of academic people telling me that I spoke in the wrong way or that I needed to make my language better or more academic, and I was like, the only thing that this is doing is making less people able to read anything that I write. And I never thought like that, I never spoke like that, so poetry was always like a way to get my own
Be real.
thoughts and in my own voice, rather than a voice that I'm told will, if I write in this way, then it makes you cleverer or makes what you're saying more intelligent, but it doesn't make any difference. That's probably why. Yeah.
Fantastic. No, that was a really interesting comparison to conclude on. Thank you so much for your time again, Holly. It's been wonderful talking to you this morning.
Go to bed.
Oh yeah, I need to.
I'm gonna do my tax return now. How exciting!
Take care and enjoy the rest of your tea. I hope I wasn't like half sleeping through that.
No, it was lovely.
Okay, see you soon. Take care. Bye.